So first, is there anything more that anybody could share on something learned or appreciated in relationship to refuge in the recent practice? Selena.
I so deeply appreciate the teaching this morning, and Petrol Rinpoche for inspiring it. It's like I that foreground background experience. Like I see my mind right now so clearly, and the habitual patterns that I have of getting things done, and an underlying experience that I am aware of I'm never doing enough. And this, I just feel sad that that my practice is in that category. You know, I wake up in the morning and I've got 2.5 hours. It's like, okay, I've got to do this, and this. And invariably, when I start practicing, the experience is so fulfilling that I don't want to stop. And then I have regret. Like I can just kind of watch the movie of my mind, and I think what's so poignant is it's juxtaposed to my experience of when I was in India, where it felt like almost like we were always in practice. There wasn't a this or that, you know. And it was this foundation of everything. There was nothing else. There was nothing else to do. You know, it was complete. And so I feel really grateful. And the concept of taking refuge in bodhicitta also really resonates deeply for me in a different way of holding my practice. So thank you.
That's even symbolized. Dorje Chung sits holding the Vajra and bell in union, union of relative and ultimate bodhicitta. So if there's, I remember saying in CBEC, knowing that Refuge Bodhichitta was going to be the first of the Ngondro practices presented, and was right at the beginning of the week, and just knowing that the week would come, anything that I said, pretty much anything that I said, would just be swept away by the rest of the time and all the other things to learn. So I thought, if you can only remember one thing about refuge and about the refuge tree, just remember the bell and the dorje, the union of relative and ultimate bodhicitta. Just kind of hold that one in the middle, and then let the rest fill in. But don't let the whole thing get swept away by having too many details.
I have a question about that exact image, because I remember that teaching and it was very powerful. But in my mind, I always think of it as, the Vajra is the compassion and the bell is the wisdom. And I don't think I remind myself, oh yeah, and that's relative and ultimate bodhicitta. I just stay with, deep compassion and wisdom. And so I wonder if I'm missing something if I don't make that link.
Not really.
No? Okay.
No. I mean, I could say yes and I could say no, but I think saying no would just become sort of, something else, place a burden on it, as opposed to saying, oh yes, and you see if you just start there, then you'll figure out later on that it's actually really all the same thing. Then you say, oh, I see. And then there are two doors to go into. Two doors to go into to find the same treasure. So you're not missing anything in the sense that you have a door. You're only missing something in the sense that, there could be two doors if I wanted to. Maybe Diane here for a moment. Oh, okay, all right. Okay.
By two doors, as in thinking of it as the wisdom and compassion, or the relative and
Ultimate.
Or both.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah, all of the above. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have to have a kind of a tender respect for the potency of different terms, and the way they resonate for us. That on one day or one part of our life, some term will feel like we're in the mood for something clean and simple. So wisdom sounds I'm just sort of picking at random. It could be the other way. Oh, wisdom sounds clean and simple. Wisdom, compassion, I kind of got that. And another time, the other one was, relative and ultimate. The word ultimate just makes my hair stand up. So that's my door that day. so kind of this, but then we have kind of this nice, kindly, warm feeling towards the whole thing after a while. There we go. Diane.
I from my experience, the way that I see all this has changed dramatically over the years, the way I experience this. I started this in 2004. And at that point, it was more, how quickly can I accomplish this? And then I learned more about the refuge tree and who exactly all these people are and something about their lives. And then I developed this profound sense of appreciation for the lineage and for what they've given us. It's incredible. And about 2007, I completed the Refuge and Bodhichitta part. And then I started it over a few years later, and it's just a totally different experience, second time through. And it became more of a just losing myself in gratitude for the lineage. Just looking at that lineage tree and feeling so incredibly grateful that I'm part of this. And I could be included in this, and I could learn from this and everything. And then now when I do this practice, it's just so heartwarming and healing and beautiful. I kind of feel like I'm Maria von Trapp on the top of the mountain. You know, when she throws her arms wide open and she sings "The Hills Are Alive" with the sound of music, the way she felt that. I mean, that's kind of the feeling that I get. This is just absolutely incredible that I can be a part of this, and I just feel so happy. And so it's really, really changed over the years. I mean, I used to sweat over, seeing my Lama as Vajradhara and, exactly how that would be and everything. And I don't sweat the details so much anymore. I just enjoy it and love it and live it and kind of bathe in it. And it's all beautiful. And I'm just really glad, that I've had the opportunity to do this. And had you told me that back in 2004, I'd have kind of looked at you like, really? So it evolves over time. It evolves.
Yeah. Thank you. As you were talking about the sense of pressure, and you went and kind of lickety split. How many years is that from 2004 to 2000? You said
14 years.
But you said 2009, or you finished the first 7. Okay, so it was 2007, so it was only 3 years? For the first, okay, yeah. Oh, that's just blazingly fast, yeah, on average. But I remember at the beginning thinking about the numbers and whatnot. And at the beginning, it's kind of like you look at your watch and you're thinking in that frame of reference. And then after a little while, sort of more realism sets in and you're looking at a calendar and flipping the months. And then you're looking at the stack of day timers that have accumulated for the year after year after year. And you're looking in that frame of reference. So it changes. But one of the things that's nice when it actually does, when you find some cycle, whether it's by completing the numbers or by restarting, sort of finishing something and restarting, whatever it is, when you have that sense of movement again, and having the opportunity to see it fresh, and to feel like it's this dynamic. It's this dynamic play, and I love the image of Maria van Tenzin standing on top of the peaks, saying the hills are alive with the sound of mantra. So I love that. So it changes, it evolves. Well, we can have more questions and comments. I want to shift a little bit and going to the possible enhancements page. Because this is kind of builds into the practice some possibilities for these kind of cycles of evolution of relationship. If we have some kinds of suggestions for how to let our minds sort of settle in on one dimension or another dimension in the practice while we're doing our recitation and prostrations. And I wasn't intentionally searching for this, but I had in my mind this idea that there is a way that one could do the Refuge and Bodhichitta with the prostrations and use that as a basis for just cultivating the 4 immeasurables. Since 4 immeasurables are really a key piece of so I was thinking along those lines, and then I was looking in a couple of books and I came across these two sets of suggestions. Yeah, under when they were talking about the refuge, this section of the Ngondro. And it's very easy if we're thinking about the image of holding all beings, our connection, just actively holding that connection as part of the practice. It's very easy. It doesn't take much to move to the contemplation, to engage the energy of the contemplation of equanimity. Because they're all there. It's not hard to bring that to mind, and when we're holding all those with whom we have a difficult relationship in front of us, we're offered the opportunity to note where we are in our cultivation of equanimity. We're offered that because unless we're really, really good at self-deception, we will notice some kind of resistance. We can wish that we held so and so and so and so, or historically or in current circumstances, we can wish or aspire that we held them in a profoundly skillful and warm-hearted way that would bring about benefit for all sentient beings. But we can see the resistance. We can see the limitations. So just in doing the prostrations, holding all sentient beings in the presence of the sources of refuge, there is a way that if we're actually doing that, we are cultivating. We don't need to sort of think about it, but we are cultivating equanimity. Cultivating this, you could say, this is a way to actually engage in the contemplation of equanimity. And in the same way, all the other of the four immeasurables are there. We're actively inviting all beings to come to refuge, to true refuge. This is an act of profound love. This is an act of great kindness. This is an act of compassion. If we really keep that animated, that piece animated in our hearts, there is a way in which these things can be sort of automatically a piece of the practice. To the extent that it sometimes helps if we actually place our attention directly on an aspect of practice, this can be beneficial to do it in this way. And the suggestions that are outlined here, one from Drigom Kagyu, and another one, I'm not sure, let's see. Rinpoche gave an attribution which I didn't include. I'm sorry about that. But do you remember what it is? No, I don't remember but I can get there very quickly because I gave a page number. It's from Sakya Pandita. So that's from. There's a balance when we're using something like this. Since we have a list of, I know, like 20 or 30 possibilities, we can go back to the perspective of this is another project. I have 20 more things to learn. That wasn't the point. You could say there are 20 more dimensions of what you're already doing that are possible to appreciate, and it might be fruitful to appreciate those, or and if you find something inspiring on them, to kind of lean into that and appreciate that. But this notion of just the aspiration, just go through the in turn, just go for refuge, thinking of the good qualities of the objects of refuge. Pray for the attainment of your aims, but just that appreciating the qualities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, to actually actively carry that as a piece of appreciation. That's one of the primary, you could say a primary focus in the cultivation of refuge is studying and learning about the qualities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and appreciating those qualities. So there's and again, that could be just turn into a project, but whenever you read something about the life of an incredible teacher, a bodhisattva, and that quality, there's some aspect of the quality, if that just allowing that to come to mind while you're going for refuge is a way to bring that to life. Allow it to come to life. May the meaning of impermanence be generated in my mind. One of the things that I found helpful in this in taking this practice up again actively was to imagine all the beings that were around, but not stuck in just one moment in their life, not just stuck at this time or that time or what they're like just today, but to feel that their lives are moving, and to see them in different moments and different aspects of their lives, in even different incarnations, and just to hold that in my mind. I found that very, very helpful, and for me, it immediately also got linked up with compassion. Just thinking, instead of my difficult to be with people who are in front being permanently difficult to be with, the element of the practice of equanimity, where you see people doing different kinds of things in different stages of life, in different moments, to feel that dynamic play. It's easier to have a sense of compassion for beings running through cycles of possible lives, cycles of, and being caught in those cycles. The prayer that may negative conditions become positive. In a certain way, this is, I think, a balance to become too kind of too harsh in the don't try to fix anything. There can be a kind of a harshness in that. And so actually praying for positive conditions. We can think what positive means in ways that are not so limiting. Then there's something that's interesting here, which is that there are several of these. We'll have to skip one to tell this story. May I be liberated through realization. May compassion ripen others' minds. Please bestow blessings, and I'm skipping one. Please bestow blessings on me that I may become skilled in the method of dependent arising. Please bestow blessings on me that whatever relationships I may enter into have meaning. I recognize those 4 lines. They come from various places. But those 4 lines, something I recognized at the beginning of all of Bokar Rinpoche's teachings. He would recite a short prayer. And part of it was the 4 dharmas of Gampopa. And then it was this prayer. And I didn't recognize it. I didn't know what it was. He was reciting in Tibetan, and I would try to write down as best I could the phonetics of it, listening over and over again. Sort of became a project during one of the seminars. And finally I had it down enough that I could go ask Ngondro what it was. So he wrote it out and wrote out the meaning of it. It's a very beautiful little prayer of aspiration. Yeah, this first one is through realization may I be liberated. Grant your blessing that through liberation may I be liberated. The next one is, ripen others' minds, ripen the mind stream. Through compassion, grant your blessing that compassion may arise, that I might ripen others' stream of being. Just thinking of being kind of like a radiant presence like the sun, who naturally allows others to ripen, like fruit ripening. Yeah.
Does that mean essentially gain my compassion?
Yes. Yeah. Grant your blessing, so through realization, grant your blessing that through liberation may I be realization may I be liberated. Grant your blessing that through compassionate activity may others' mind streams be ripened. The next one is very hard I think it's quite hard to translate. That may I become skilled in the method of dependent arising. It's tendril top like tendril top. Tendril is the dependent arising, the interdependent, and top is method, but it means like skillful means. So in the play of interdependence, may I become skilled at acting in the midst of manifesting skillful means in the midst of this infinite interdependent display. Something like that. And then may each and every meeting with another be profoundly meaningful. And the last one kind of turns on its head this notion that something profoundly meaningful is sort of this, would necessarily have to be this accumulation of some big buildup to something. It offers the opportunity that any moment, any interaction, any meeting with another that we have could actually be this occasion for some kind of very profound, something profoundly meaningful to happen in the dynamic of that meeting. So it's very, but all of these, you could bring these to mind while doing prostrations. the notion of may each and every meeting with another being be the ground for something profound. And then just to let that play in the imagination of all beings, being immediately present.
I heard Eric refer to tendril in a conversation that he had with Boka Rinpoche, where there was an acknowledgement of tendril between the two of them. Does that, I mean, so I got from that just interdependence of all beings, but also an interdependence between individuals. That
Oh yeah.
yeah.
One of the very impactful teachings that Boka Rinpoche offered, just as a side note in conversation, talking about interdependence. He says, "Oh yeah, if you're really under the interdependence, you know that if somebody likes flowers, you offer a flower." And up to that point, I had a very geometric sort of notion, like the Indra's web, kind of this geometric spatial notion of interdependence, being like point A is so-and-so and point B is so-and-so and point C. So you have, it's just and then you draw a bazillion lines between them. And so then you say, and now they're all connected. But when he said, flowers, if you know somebody likes flowers, you offer flowers, that's the resonance of the string in between, the dynamic resonance of that. So having some sense of all the ways in which this interdependent display manifests and dances, all the different dimensions of that dance. It was like, that opened it up quite a bit. And it became, and also made it very kind of easy to put my finger on it right in the moment, which I thought was something. It just like may each and every meeting with another be an occasion for something profoundly meaningful. It opens up the possibility and the potential of a moment in a way that didn't before. Different dimensions of it. So anyway, I just wanted to mention kind of it's an opportunity to tell a story that I like to tell anyway, so. And please bestow on me blessings that my devotion to the teacher may be stable and that I may keep my promise, or keep my, say commitment, but to go back to what we were talking about before, to maintain my sense of committedness and connection, to really keep that alive. Please bestow blessings on me that I may generate in my mind the meditative stabilization of the stages of generation and completion. So this is an example of a kind of a very particular aspiration. You can say, oh, I'm not necessarily doing practices of the generation and completion stage at the moment, but you could say, may my shamatha just get a little bit better. So whatever it is, may my cultivation of mind training go a little deeper. And that's a good different dimension that could come to play in this. Then we go from the particulars to the overarching. Please cause the generation of supreme realization in my mind. This is kind of like, well, we'll just go for that one and everything's covered underneath that. The suggestions, I'm not going to go through all the suggestions from Sakya Pandita, but I do want to mention does anybody need a break? If you need a break, be speedy. There's a couple of things in here, kind of a topic that I wanted to bring in. It's a fresh topic, but Sakya Pandita goes through kind of the particulars of the act of going for refuge and the bowing and how one moves through it, the embodied quality of the practice, and how to connect with that embodied quality of the practice. And then down towards the end, may I work for all beings, as I bend and stretch my forelimbs, may I work for all beings through the 4 types of activity. Extra comma not needed. As I stretch and contract all my muscles and nerves, may all the knots on our channels be freed. As I bend my spinal cord forward and backwards, may we all have our energy channeled through our central channel. So there's a dimension of the practice. He's going from kind of an outer sense of connecting the outer motions, the actual physical motions that we go through with particular meanings. As I place my joined palms on my crown, may we reach the ultimate realm. So he's making a connection between this outer, the outer gesture and these inner qualities. But here he's talking about the impact of the prostrations, the physical activity on the subtle body. And this is a dimension of the practice that's alluded to. It's often not talked about very much, but Khenpo Rinpoche mentioned this in India. Bokar Rinpoche would mention it on occasion. You'll find it sort of mentioned a little bit here and there. Generally not going into in any detail for a variety of good reasons, actually. But it's acknowledged. If we go back to, there was part of something that I talked about last time, and something that I found kind of refreshed in my mind in reading Patrul Rinpoche, talking about a kind of a general view of these practices, where though we are using our kind of our creative imagination, we're not using our creative imagination to imagine something that is actually really other than as things are. We're using our creative imagination actually to relate to things as they are. We're being given hints as to how to see things as we are. And just when we talk about the connection with all sentient beings and appreciating interdependence, when we're bringing that play, the presence of all beings to mind, we're actually reminding ourselves through our creative imagination, we're reminding ourselves of how things actually are, how our connections actually are continuously manifesting. And when we see the objects of refuge immediately in front of us, we're reminding ourselves that we're actually never cut off from our enlightened potential. We're never truly separate from that. And as we proceed through the Ngondro practices, we're encouraged to move from our sense of our ordinary perspectives on our circumstances. I used the example last time in Vajrasattva, to move from simply a sense of purification where we are our ordinary self, getting rid of little bits of impurity, which is important piece. We should do that. We should purify on an incremental basis. But in the end, we're offered a moment to glimpse ourselves as being completely free from that. And in that, then if we proceed further into the practices, with Guru Yoga, skip over Mandala, which has a whole bunch of things that are actually very relevant to this, but skip over that to Guru Yoga. Just that sense of the union of ourselves and the Guru, our union ourselves and the Buddha. No different. And if we're really going to look deeply into this, our ordinary sense of our body and our energy is driven by the perspective of ourselves as these little klesha beings, as beings that operate within the domain of confusion, and then manipulate our kind of try different combinations. It's like if the combination lock with the kleshas, and we're sitting there. We don't realize what the game is, but we keep trying different combinations of, a little bit of free pride to the left, a little bit of jealousy to the right, a little. We're always constantly, and our being is actually a reflection of this. To the extent that we can immediately identify how our body feels really different if somebody does something absolutely outrageous and we go, we can easily see how much our being at an embodied level reflects all the different play of the kleshas. And so to appreciate, if we go back to the Vajrasattva, this notion in kind of this nice, calm moment, we can imagine ourselves having let go of all our kleshas, and then the sense that actually it could be completely free of that. There are practices, all the practices that have some kind of embodied element, and Vajrasattva is one of them. They work with this, how we configure our being kind of as an embodied being. They work with that. Instead of seeing my body as, well, kind of like 67 and going on dead, and kind of feeling a certain way today because of this, that, or the other thing, instead of seeing myself in those terms, to actually see myself as completely pure. It's a different shift. And all the practices, whether it's just in calm abiding, sitting with a balanced posture, where our body is balanced, not being drawn off one way or another, not being relaxed. Even just sitting in calm abiding is working with this, the subtle body. So doing the prostrations is another way. It also has an impact on this. It's an expression of energy, it's an expression of motion, where we're connecting with the enlightened ones. We're doing it in the field of bodhicitta. So we have that. And another element of the practice that actively works with this within the Mahamudra program is the three clearing breaths. So all the practices have some dimension where they're working with this. Chenrezig practice, to see ourselves as Chenrezig, not in terms. And Chenrezig arrives on the scene as the result of the aspiration, profound aspiration, to incarnate for the benefit of beings. The notion of incarnation, the notion of physical manifestation, is a reflection of this profound wish. So all of these give us an opportunity to kind of work with this dimension. And the nice thing is that we don't have to make a big deal out of it. It's just something that's part of it, part of the practice. It's built in, just the way equanimity is kind of built in when we're imagining all sentient beings present. The working with the subtle body is built in when we sit up, balanced and relaxed, leaving the energy of the body pretty much in harmony. It's built in. But we can appreciate, I bring it up not so much to make it's like, oh, here's another thing to do, but to appreciate another dimension of the practice. If we just say, well, my mind went all over the place, but there I was, sitting balanced and relaxed. There is a way in which that had an impact, just that much, long term. So, that was a lot of talking for a while. Do you have any questions on that or anything else? Particularly going back to, I'll remind you where it started. That monologue started with the contemplations to enhance a session.
This isn't really a question, but more just the way I would envision working with these. Mm-hmm. And it might work completely different for someone else, but it seems to me that these suggestions that you said, the 4 lines that were part of a prayer that Bokar Rinpoche used regularly, they almost sound like a carrying practice. You could just take one line and, for this week when I do my prostrations, this is what I'm going to remember before I begin. Mm-hmm. If I tried to think of all of them, I'd be overwhelmed.
No.
So
I would actively discourage that.
Okay.
Unless your mind was such that it actually needed so much to in order to feel like it was actually engaged somehow, then that's fine. So just to de-universalize any particular piece of advice. Generally speaking, with all contemplations, the more familiar we are with them just as a contained activity by themselves, the more they will actually sort of naturally arise without having having to work at it so much. They'll become naturally part of it, and this is important. I think that's actually a kind of an important point, because if we think, oh, I was supposed to do some of these contemplations. Like, no, what were they? No, there was something about. I'm not sure what that was. I mean, then it's like, oh, well, that wasn't. It's not the worst thing in the world, and I've done plenty of that. So, if it is, then I'm the worst person in the world. But it's better if we actively contemplate it and become familiar with it, kind of for its own its own virtue, and then they become more naturally part of things. But there is a way. And sometimes these practices are sometimes presented, and some people can only just get like, it works for them to just have the recipe. Just give me the recipe. Page 1, recite 3 times. Add 1 dash bodhicitta. Visualize this, do that. And then within that recipe, they learn how to cook. And they don't need anything else. And a bunch of other things just complicate matters. They don't actually help. And there is a way in which that's a very traditional way that these practices were presented. So sometimes it's okay, just stick with the recipe without trying to add any bells and whistles, without trying to just be very simple. I step into the environment with all sentient beings, and they're the object of refuge. I go for refuge and do my prostrations. So there's a way in which the recipe by itself is enough. For many people, though, it's helpful to have some hints or some fresheners, something to freshen things up, to help us see what we didn't see before.
I can imagine using ringotukus in another way, kind of bringing it off cushion, but working toward the familiarization, which really is cool, almost magic, the way familiarity kind of like it pops up when needed. Mm-hmm. But if I saw someone else kind of holding their forehead, I might think of may this, or if I was like touching my throat or feeling my throat, it's like, well, may the actions and defilements of speech be. Sometimes I've heard teachers mention how they go through the day as they go through a door. They think of it as a gateway, mm-hmm. as just a way of bringing it present, off cushion, constantly. But it seems like some of these could be used that way.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good point. Patrul Rinpoche spends quite a bit of time going through a whole bunch of things, ways that you could, things to do to make sure that you carry the practice. And it really is, it's exactly like you don't leave the potential for doing something connected to the Dharma out of any situation. Whether you're driving, walking, talking, standing, sitting. It's got a long list.
It might be in
In Boka Rinpoche's
The daily life.
a day in the life of a bodhisattva. Is it day in the life of a practitioner or a day in the life of a bodhisattva? Practitioner. Some of the main ones that Patrul Rinpoche suggests is, if we're actively doing the refuge practice, to remember the sources of refuge in all situations, and usually brought down to just the guru. But when we're walking, the traditional practice of that we're all like, when we went to the stupa, we were walking around the stupa, to always be thinking of that we're circumambulating the sources of refuge. If we're sitting, then above the crown of our head, the sources of refuge. When we're eating, the sources of refuge are at our throat, and they're directly enjoying our enjoyment of the taste. So it's not like we chew it up and it goes down like this kind of puree, kind of partially pureed stuff that's, you kind of wish they also had an umbrella, so that they actually directly appreciate the pleasure or the appreciation of the food. And when sleeping, falling asleep, then at the heart center. That's one of the most traditional. And then there are a couple of lines that he had. I said, if you doing this, then, and you really continually keep the sources of refuge to mind, and it could be any particular practice, but particularly the embodied practices of refuge or yidam practice like that. So, this practice is essential to dissolve delusions into clear light, keeping the sources of refuge. And he also says, never separate from a clear mental image of the refuge deities. Sometimes we talk about having a sense of presence. The sense of the presence is the key thing. And that if we're really going to kind of the heart of it, then that a clear sense of the presence and the qualities of the sources of refuge are there. That's really at the heart of it. Khenpo Rinpoche at this last seminar talked some about how over time, do you remember this part? Over time that the clarity of the visualization, the increasing clarity of the visualization becomes an active piece of the practice. Not to burden ourselves prematurely with it, but to have a sense that there is an ever deepening possibility for this kind of vivid stability of mind, down to if all the sources of refuge are clear, then in each pore of each of the deities, then there's a pure land. in each pore. And then within each Pure Land, there are all the deities. And so this sense that the mind has this capacity for something, to holding things, and we can think, no, that's not possible. But then if we work over a period of years, we find out that more is possible. More things are possible than we ever imagined. So, but if you have this or have access to it, it's looking at the list of all the different suggestions for carrying. I wrote down about 20 of them, but it's good just finding more and more little opportunities. Yeah.
Is there time for one more?
Yes.
Okay. So that refuge tree and the pores with all the deities, each pore, that sounded like what you might have been pointing toward when you said also we could use our imagination to not just see things as they are, but beyond that.
Yeah, I wasn't pointing specifically at that, but it's true.
That contained
That to be able to see more in a more profound way into the possibility of the mind and our connections, all that arises within it, all that arises within our experience. And sometime we can go over the Dorje Changtungma. I heard a little buzz of interest on that. That was one of my one of the possibilities of things to talk about today. But we'll definitely talk about it during Guru Yoga. Yeah?
It's just a quick question.
It's fine.
Do you, I'm curious, do you, when you said that you were going to possibly teach this on a monthly instead of bi-monthly basis, would you like some feedback around that? Or
sure.
What can I do to make that happen?
I know there are practical things that can be done to make that happen, because I know that Linda Grove did a lot of things to make sure that this happened today, including running up and turning on the streaming and getting her, and Willa, yeah. So I think that is yes. So there are practical things that can be done, and I know a lot of you are already doing all kinds of practical things, but for those of you who aren't here and might be listening, you too could also be part of it. Just because you're over there on the other side of some kind of digital time warp doesn't mean that you can't contribute. You'll be here sometime. Yes, so part of it is just the things fall in between months and the quarters and whatnot. So just being able to make sure that we actually kind of follow the quarterly thing too is, yeah. Peter.
Well, this is the second class and this happened monthly, so the next class is scheduled for May. Is that the idea? Because so far it's been monthly.
Yes, so far it's been monthly, and I thought, oh, I should check to see whether or not it was bi-monthly, and then I just added one, or it's bi-monthly and then it was designed for a break. I have to look at this schedule.
And I guess the other just consideration is, in terms of people scheduling, I have flexibility. So if the third class wasn't in May but was in April, I could probably still attend that one. But I don't know, that could have an impact on someone else who said, oh, that's great, I'm going to be away in April or something, and then be less happy. How would you arrive at consensus for making the next class be on a different day?
Yeah. I think April would be the natural advance to Vajrasattva, wouldn't it? I'm looking at people who.
I know we're missing this gentleman.
Suvansh. Yeah.
Does anybody have a problem coming in April?
Well, it depends on availability in the hall.
Yeah.
That's what I need to check on.
Yeah.
The other classes.
Yeah. I don't have everything on my calendar, but we'll let's tentatively work for that. I think it would be easier for people, I think, to have a few more opportunities, so we can go kind of back and forth between things that happen more towards the front end of a cycle of practice, and then things that are more like now that we've done it for a little bit, how does it look and work? Because both those pieces are, I think, important to acknowledge and support. It's without the launch, it's hard to get started, and without the checking back in, it's harder to actually really kind of feel like you're pulling something together in the practice. So, with Linda Grove's help, we can at least check in for April, and then we can see how it goes from there. We'll have to see. There may be times. There may be times in the year where I have evaporated. Other things are going to happen too. We have there's lots of stuff going on in June, so.
The next one is scheduled for May, right? Is it the month that's scheduled?
Yes, I think so, but I'd have to look. All right. Well, let's.
In the meantime, could you maybe put out something asking students for their questions
Yes.
to
Yeah.
include them going forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So, according to my magical clock, we have exactly 1 minute, and so let's conclude with a moment of practice, and then in the Ngondro, since I know we can all be on the same page, let's get ready to recite the dedication from that. I think, what page do you have for the beginning of dedications? 63? All right, there. So let's just sit for a moment. And dedicate. I dedicate this virtue that all beings without exception reach the undying state of Vajra mind through the ever blissful union of means and wisdom. Traveling the inner Vajra path, may they attain the pinnacle of awakening. By this virtue, may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Through the blessing of the Buddhas who attained the three kayas, through the blessing of the unchanging truth of Dharmata, through the blessing of the unwavering intention of the Sangha, may this dedication and aspiration be fulfilled.